So yes, we're finally here. The Garfield movie with Chris Pratt front and center is finally actually out. Man, capitalism really did pop off today. This movie has been an interesting one on the marketing front, right? I know earlier in the week we also made another Garfield video talking about all the different overblown trailers, marketing crossovers, and a history of the franchise in general, including the live action movies. But this movie really does look to be kind of like, I would argue, a standout icon for what the current state of the animation industry is in. Garfield as an IP is just massively known as a pop culture western character, so a movie made of him is just kind of another day. This is very much going for the standard movie. It's a kid's animation. You don't need to be enticed to want to see the character, you already know them, and so it very much just ran off on its own the whole time. Both in the marketing leading up to this, in the form of trailers and social media posts, and then the actual movie itself. I've finally gotten around to seeing it. I went over to my local independent cinema, and I'm here now to tell you whether this movie was actually good. I didn't have high hopes leading up to this movie because I'd seen so damn much from the trailers, but let's get into it, shall we? Starting off, before we even start, also just at another point in time, I guess, in sitting down in the cinemas and actually getting the movie trailers for before the Garfield movie, obviously they were all animated movies of their own right, and it's been a crazy lineup when you think about it this year. With the likes of Illumination's Despicable Me 4 as a trailer, you had Pixar's Inside Out 2, Disney had the new Mufasa Lion King trailer. Like, each massive major studio had a massive major project, and it really is a time to be alive at the minute with the animation field. I mean, they're all sequels and remakes, but, you know, big projects are big projects. As I say, this capitalism manifest, it's really the theme of this franchise movie. And then leading on to that as well, there were so many goddamn logos for this movie. And for some reason, I don't know why, every logo decided to be triple the length of usual. At least it makes sense that the Columbia Pictures is celebrating 100 years, so they went off on one, but wow. But anyway, the actual presentation of this movie is a little bit interesting, as it starts off with Garfield directly addressing the audience like a narrator, but will only do so at the very beginning and then never again. Sure, fine, whatever. We immediately actually begin with him ordering food delivery on his phone. The literal opening sequence is literally a vertical video. And I think that's so interesting because there is so much mobile phone presence in this movie. Everywhere. The following sequence is then immediately the prequel with a young Garfield. We'll get to plenty of thoughts on that in a minute, but even there as well, we also see an example of mobile phones being used for family games. It's a weird choice, right? And I've always been quite cynical about just phone presence because it usually just feels a little bit contrived and chucked in there. And I do kind of feel the same as well now. But to be fair, phones are a massive part of our society, and I guess that's why they really wanted to reflect that, so that younger kids could relate to characters as long as they've got a phone the whole time. It's an interesting thing that they really decided to add it into the story. More so than that, John is berated by one of the staff workers to consider getting onto dating apps, and then they go on to list a whole bunch of dating apps like Tinder and the other ones that I didn't hear probably. There's a brief moment of the villain who wants to video themselves scaring the cats, so like as if they want to be an influencer, but it didn't really go into an influencer plotline. She just wanted to record a video, I guess. And honestly, actually, every presence of mobile phones was just kind of there, you know? It didn't really elevate the plotline. The examples they used to showcase the phones were pretty simple, other than to fit in a Walmart product placement. And in general, I didn't like it. But I could also kind of get along with it. You know, it's a capitalistic movie. They do the things, the tropes. It's not necessarily breaking new territory. Now, the idea of a Garfield origin story, of course in its own way is very tropey and easy to do in the modern world, is actually really, really good. I like a cute baby Garfield. That is like one of the driving forces for a lot of the trailers as well, and it's really nice to see. Although when you actually watch it as well, you'll see that baby Garfield immediately recognizes that they want lasagna on the menu over pizza or something else, so they just seem to have inert knowledge of Italian food, I guess. And then just as quickly, of course, that scene is just as short as it is in the trailer, and so you don't really see Garfield being cute ever again. He then goes into his moody, grudgy, arrogant, you know, Garfield cat that we know. And to be fair, I guess you can't do much else with the Garfield character. He isn't cute, and that's the point, but yeah. Any jokes that were happening during this sequence, you've seen before. The trailer did a massive job at spoiling the whole thing. As someone who actually watched all 15 trailers, yeah, a lot's covered. I even said earlier in the week that there might be 7 trailers in between the last Garfield video and this one. No, it turns out they held back slightly. There's only been 5 trailers since. Although I bet there's a launch trailer as well, isn't there, that's going along with it. Let me check. Yep, there it is. There are 2 extra ones. Father and son vignette and the final trailer that has a thumbnail from the final battle. I love it, Garfield movie. Yes, it's a kid's movie, and it ain't going any further than that. Though I will say one joke that didn't appear in the prequel origin story is the fact that baby Garfield starts crying at the idea of being left alone again, and then the tears send him down the road in like a river. That's great, I like that. Generally though, this movie has a lot of jokes. I went to a theater with, you know, people in it. It wasn't full because it was midday on a Friday, so most of the kids were still in school, I guess. Bit of a weird choice for an upload day. And I don't think I heard a single joke really fly. Some of the best ones were in the trailer, so I certainly didn't laugh at those, and then everything else was so kind of easy. And I think that's kind of the trend of this movie. It's just playing the motions, it's just a lot of cliches. There's a moment where Garfield sits on his chair, now adult form, watching a bunch of cat videos. And these cat videos, I kid you not, are like 15 years old. It's like the off-brand keyboard cat that's literally from like 2007. That's 17 years old. Wasn't there a competition to see funny cats in the movie? None of those were present. Oh, not until the credit sequence. Okay. And even then they were kind of simple. It was a kitten playing around with a dog's ear, you know, like really simple. Anyway, following that, we then get some montages of life with John, and you realize just how much John is allowing his pets to be poisoned with an abominable amount of cheese, and how much they keep overcharging his credit card. Honestly, I feel bad for John the whole time, but I guess that's the point. And then just as quickly, Garfield and Odie are actually kidnapped. I thought there was going to be a villain appearance we only see right at the very end, but no. They appear right now, coming in very lightly as just doing a mild jump scare, and then they're just fully lit talking. Same as the dad, he just appears in a cloak and then immediately is dethroned like in the trailer, and then they just start talking. There's very little tension in this movie. And then after a few more horrible lines, like Garfield saying, "Please call me G-Money," and then Odie saying, basically, "Nobody calls you that," without using any words. Also, the villain goes on to be like, "Are you feline okay?" You know, it's like if you had to just put a script together with the most easiest of jokes, go for it. They're then all hired by the cat to do a big old milk heist because the father had wronged the cat in the past, and Garfield was just being dragged in because she likes how miserable she makes him. That's kind of contrived because we learn later that the father is not really miserable about his son being around, but whatever. Once again, it's just a contrived plotline to tell an adventure story. What did you expect? Is what I expected. Let's just run with it, you know? You then also got these 2 villainous dogs that are watching the whole time. They kind of remind me, this trio of villains, as like the flushed away villains, where you got the big bad Toad, and then you got big guy and little guy chubby people. They are probably my favorite part of the movie. They don't do much. I like one of the jokes they have of how they're always watching, but they have weird physics to them, so they can hide behind like a tiny sign. But otherwise, they don't get enough dialogue lines. The dialogue they do say is pretty fun, especially the little guy. I like the ratty little guy. But again, like, if that's the best part of the jokes, it's very little. It got very little laughs in the cinema, and there were children in the screening, you know? John, meanwhile, spots that Garfield is missing the whole time and proceeds to do nothing other than wait on the phone calls. He's not relevant to this plot, so we just leave him be, keep him in place, don't worry about him. Instead, he's gonna have to deal with terrible customer service voicemails. Wow, I haven't been hearing those jokes since 20 years ago. Again, as well, I think it's one of those things where this movie is so much only a kid's movie that it's playing the field as if no other joke has ever been invented before. This is meant to be somebody's first movie. It's a little bit more adult than a movie built for 3-year-olds, but also, it's pretty simple, bland, and basic. Here's all the tropes so that you know how a movie is built. Nobody dies. Enjoy, child. I heard reviews preemptively saying this movie's actually good. I'm not gonna say it's terrible. I'm just going to nitpick everything as we go and realize it's nothing special. There's then other moments to just get in as many product placements as you can, like an Olive Garden line that says, "You don't know fear, you've obviously never been in an Olive Garden that's run out of breadsticks." Great, I don't get that, we don't have Olive Garden here. They have a moment of Garfield being attacked by spiders and then learning that they're scared of cedar chips. But then that doesn't come back. I thought that was going to be established as like a final act thing, but nope, it's gone. But anyway, eventually we get to Lactose Farms, the place of the heist, and they can't get in because it's been bought by a corporate overlord who has made it overly secure and ruined the whole business. Gee, wow, how ironic that that is part of the plotline. Somebody wrote it, but that's not going to be thought of any further in depth to that. We then come to learn that there's actually a romance plot, as one of the 2 mascots has now been kicked out of the Lactose Farms, and their other half is trapped on the inside, so they are part of the heist. And it's nice, actually, there are a few flashback sequences that have some nice 2D backgrounds, or just 2D designs in general, which to me seems like a really nice form of a love letter to animation created by the animators. As I say with every modern movie these days, the animation is actually pretty great. I have no complaints on the visuals. Honestly, the sort of 3D design of the humans as well is very, very fun. I love putting them into a thumbnail. It's really, really nice. And coming up here is probably the most audible laugh from a joke I heard in the cinema, and that is the fact that in planning the heist, Garfield is given the nickname and symbolic piece as Roadkill. The father Vic is given like a confident toad, Odie is a sneaky chipmunk, and Garfield is Roadkill. That got a good laugh when it was first revealed. But then they go on to spread out this one gag on and on and on, with Garfield confronting about it, and then saying about, oh, roadkills are possums, possums are smart, possum could be just pretending to be dead, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. And the best joke in the movie, they kill right there and then. Comedically, this movie is unfunny, or spoiled so that maybe it would be funny if they didn't show every piece of this movie they could in about 50 minutes of trailer time. Genuinely, I put it all together, it's like 40 to 50 minutes long that we've had from the marketing. Although a line I really liked that didn't get any kind of mention is an under-the-breath line that Chris Pratt said about possums being smart, about, I'm sure he is until he ate a pickup truck. That's fun. Anyway, what follows then is a montage of trying to get along with the father in order to make them a better team. And it's just a sequence of them being beaten a while. Though I do like the joke of them sliding down the hill screaming and then going quiet because there's a family of bunnies. And then screaming again straight afterwards. Simple, fine, yeah, whatever. Also, what's interesting is what they did with the character of Odie. They've turned him into the smartest character of the whole group, and the recurring gag is that he's doing these craft projects for Garfield in the background, or just in general. You'll see him walking back and forth in the background before doing some big payoff. That's actually really nice. I'm glad they managed to do that, considering Odie is usually the most stupidest in past renditions of Garfield. I quite like his character. And then eventually they come and fix their differences by being tied up to a tree together, where we learn that the father didn't abandon Garfield in that alleyway. What do you know, he went out to go get food and then got stuck for too long, and then realized that John gives Garfield a better life with all sorts of food and love, and so decided to leave them be to a better life. And then goes on to stalk him through his house window and watches him grow up. There's a lot of stalking in this movie. The two dog villains, now the father Vic. There's an interesting theme there. Anyway, now the heist can begin, and another character is pulled right out of the Aardman DreamWorks bag, as the next section starts to feel a heck of a lot like Chicken Run, or maybe even Chicken Run 2, as now there's a head guard security lady, who's, you know, just Miss Tweedy, essentially. And the heist to gather all this milk takes place in a giant cheese factory, which, on a writing point, considering this is Garfield, is the best place you can kind of set some kind of action sequence. And it's really interesting as the factory does these big cartoony developments into different areas of cheese that are all hazards. With a greater slide and a fondue melting lava pot section elsewhere, it actually works really, really nicely. Until eventually they're caught by the head security guard and Vic betrays them all in order to get the job done. Oh my god, it's the emotional height. Father was terrible after all. Let's follow it up with Garfield getting sent to the pound and Snoop Dogg appearing in that pound. Alright, anyway, Father Vic is then taken by the villain again, who's not even caring about the heist and just wanted him taken to the pound, because she had to go to the pound for 5 years. Garfield then gets back everything he wants by getting back to John finally, after being saved by John at the pound, and then realizes that the father was saving him, knowing that the villain was going to betray them again, and that by sending them to the pound, they would get back to John and have their happy life again. A little bit of a stretch to reach that point, but yeah, sure. So they then go on to try and save the father, who's being trapped on a train and going to be chucked off a bridge, because instead of 5 years of grueling punishment, I guess a quick death is fine enough now. And so the real final battle comes in a way that I also agree is a perfect way to do a big Garfield action sequence, as Garfield, using the drone food delivery that was established at the first part of the movie, goes on to order $6,000 worth of food, or it was 6,000 drones, one or the other, has a fleet of drones throwing food everywhere in order to use as the battlegrounds and weaponizing their food addiction against all the villains. It's nice. It's not very in character for a slow fat cat to be bouncing around that much, but I guess he's had 2 days of being outdoors, so maybe it makes sense. He then immediately ruins it by saying, I do my own stunts, me and Tom Cruise, but, you know, alright, Chris Pratt. There's other little gags like hot sauce turning into fiery breath, that's nice. He does a leap of faith to get caught by his father now that he trusts him. And then they jump off of the bridge. Odie has built them a net, and the net turns them into a bungee jump right back to be caught by the villains. Some more stuff goes on for a while. They're about to be chucked off the bridge again anyway by the villainous British dogs, only for them to then betray the main villain because they realize that they actually are not comfortable with this. And also the goal was to make the cats hurt, and this makes them feel at peace because they've met each other, I guess. Also, the big dog's apparently a New Yorker, but then later on I'm pretty sure his voice goes back to British. Okay. Then they all fall off the bridge. The big dog becomes a parachute and saves the day, and then he doesn't, and then the big bull that was part of the heist before swings in and saves the day actually. Including the cat, because no one's allowed to die in this movie. In a lot of ways, it's a bit wild. In a lot of ways, it's not. You know, it's just kind of your standard, oh, I found my dad. I gotta do a heist. The heist goes badly. I got everything I wanted. I gotta go back to save my dad. That's it, you know? And then for the finale, it randomly goes into a noir sequence as they manage to make a deal with the head security guy, swapping Ethel, the other half milking cow, for the cat villain that actually arranged the whole heist. They use an app that allows humans and animals to speak, which apparently works in this world. I guess there you go, there's a use of phones that's helpful to the plot. A little bit crammed in there, but sure. The villain cat is taken to do community work, I guess. The dogs are now hired by Lactose Farms, and I kid you not, when the two romantic characters, the bull and the cow, finally reunite, they play that cliche, jazzy romance music, and they give each other me eyes. And then they dive off screen with a bunch of hearts coming in. It is not subtle, and a little uncomfortable, to be honest. Garfield returns home, has a lovely dinner with John. Father is invited as well, and they montage to the good times. All one big super family that you think would get in the way in the sequel. And then, after taking little pieces from Flushed Away and Chicken Run and all sorts of other general cliches of this kind of animal adventure thing, we finish with the punchline from Home Alone 2 of John finding out of the bill that Garfield had racked up for that finale sequence. Add in an extra montage of product placements from Walmart and FedEx, and finally, you can call it a day there. Finishing up with a post-credits that's the old-school comic aesthetic, just saying, hey, I bet you're waiting for the sequel, and then not answering the question. I kind of think a giant Samuel L. Jackson cat kind of gets in the way of the sequel, since he's just sort of there now as part of the lore, but yeah, sure, whatever. This movie, in all regards, is just fully standard. It's not pushing the boundaries like past Sony movies like Mitchell's vs. the Machines. It knows exactly what it is and is staying true to it. It follows all the tropes and the cliches, but also, it's nice to look at. The story is nice, there is even some emotional heart. The dad was stalking Garfield by standing in an oak tree the whole time and making a carving every time he visited, so there's loads on the tree. Well, it's nice. If you haven't seen every animated movie in the past like I'm trying to do, then yeah, it's a decent fine movie. It is good. But in my mind, I quite like when kids' entertainment pushes the boundaries and does something more rather than just filling the void with more. This is just content. And I'm sure there were ways they could have expanded it to be great or even a masterpiece, but this movie just didn't try to be. Sony Pictures, I guess, can be quite 50-50 as an animation studio. Sometimes, depending on who they have working for them, they have some of the best craft of the animation industry to date, and other times, this is just filling a bill. They had an IP, they made money using that IP, and then they, just like Sonic really, merchandised it as much as they could and added in all the sponsorship product placements they could. I wouldn't say this movie is a waste of time. It's just another movie added to the unending list of content made by bigwigs. For me, the movie was worth it just so that I could get out and get some actual sunlight in my veins. But otherwise, this movie is just a movie. And the very fact that I've been shuffling all of the trailers, all 50 minutes of trailer footage in the background of this ramble, means you've probably already seen a good 40% of this movie anyway. Clips from practically every scene other than some late-stage John stuff, I guess. And he's not even prevalent anyway, he could have done way more. He stands in the same place and worries about his cat, that's it. But there you are, that is my review of the Garfield movie. See it if you want, it's nothing special. On that note, I'm gonna end it off there. My name's been Daz, thank you very much for reaching the end of this review. Do let me know your thoughts on the Garfield movie, or whether you're choosing not to watch it at all, down in the comments or on our Discord server, and I shall see you in a little bit.